What's happening, everybody? Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the finale, day 30 of our favorite comeback albums of all time. We've got my pick for the final pick today, as well as the honorable mentions. We've been doing it all month, looking at bands, artists that came back from some kind of adversity to release a killer album that most people loved. And it was a comeback from either what happened right before or maybe what happened a long time ago, right? Maybe there's a big, long layoff, some kind of change in the lineup, a death in the lineup, right? A critically panned, disappointing album. They returned with a killer record. You know, whatever the comeback might be, we've been looking at them all month, all sorts of cool ones. So many to choose from, right? We didn't get to a lot of them that I would have liked to, but hopefully mention a bunch of them in the honorable mentions that maybe you guys have mentioned throughout the course of the month. So today, this comeback is the ninth studio album by this British band. It was released April 18th, 1980. Recorded at Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida, as well as Ferber Studios in Paris, France. Produced by Martin Birch for Vertigo Records. I'm talking about Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. Yes. Of course it's a comeback, right? Because, I mean, let's face it. Technical Ecstasy is a good album. Never Say Die. Some people love it, some people hate it. Not a big commercial success at all. Band coming apart at the seams, all sorts of addictions and demons happening within the band. Ozzy Osbourne's jettisoned, right? He goes off into exile for a little bit before he puts together his great comeback. And the band is left without a singer, right? They tried Dave Walker from Fleetwood Mac and Savoy Brown. He comes in and out of the band. Ozzy comes back, right? Then Ozzy leaves again. A chance meeting between Geezer and Tony, right? There was two of them, and a guy named Ronnie James Dio, who had just left Rainbow not too long before. And before you know it, they start writing together and recording together, and the new lineup of Black Sabbath happens. And this is the album, of course, that results. Very different album for Black Sabbath. But after the weird experimentation that was going on with Never Say Die and even a little bit Technical Ecstasy, here we have a Black Sabbath that's bursting into the 80s with newfound power and might and embracing kind of what's going on over there in Great Britain, right? The new wave of British heavy metal, and releasing, you know, one of their strongest albums in a few years. With, of course, the lineup of, like I said, Ronnie James Dio on vocals, Tony Iommi on guitars, Geezer Butler bass, and Bill Ward on drums. And you've got Ronnie writing lyrics here, right? So, of course, there's different flavors going on. This is a much, much different album. Of course, everybody knows the songs on here, right? Neon Nights, what a kick-ass opener. Children of the Sea. That's something that Sabbath had never tried anything like that before. Absolutely gorgeous song, powerful song. Lady Evil, the title track Heaven and Hell, one of their most epic tunes. So powerful. Side 2, got Wishing Well, the classic Die Young, Walk Away, and Lonely is the Word. A little kind of slower, bluesier track to finish out the album with a great vocal from Ronnie and killer guitar soloing from Tony. I mean, it's a classic album. It starts a new era for Black Sabbath. They would continue on with the Mob Rules. Shortly thereafter, before of course, this lineup would implode. Well, Bill had left shortly after Heaven and Hell. In comes Vinny Appice for the Mob Rules album and tour. And then starts a whole ripple effect with lots of changes within Sabbath on and off for the remainder of the decade, right? And Ronnie would not return along with Vinny until the Dehumanizer album many years later. But but this is a drop-dead classic. A great comeback for the band. And again, you know, after the relative disappointment of the two previous albums and the loss of their iconic singer, this was seen as a grand success. Canada, number 23 on the charts. Germany, 37. Japan, 60. New Zealand, 44. Norway, 22. Sweden, 25. UK charts, number 9. US Billboard, 228. We've also got, and even when they reissued and remastered and these albums, this album popped back on the charts all sorts of places around the globe. As far as certifications go, Canada Gold, 50,000 units sold. UK Gold, 100,000 units sold. And here in the States, Platinum, 1 million copies sold of Heaven and Hell. And, yeah. As far as singles go, Neon Nights was released June 1980. Lady Evil, 1980 as well. And then later in the year in November, Die Young. Die Young. Die Young, Die Young, Die Young, Die Young, Die Young. Yeah, classic album. Classic album. That is my final pick of the month. Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. You know, arguably you could pick a few Black Sabbath albums, right? A lot of people would say like 13 is a great comeback album. That was a really big album for them, reuniting with Ozzy for the first time in many, many years. Right? So that could be one. You could say Dehumanizer was a comeback with Dio, right? You could say the Heaven and Hell album, the band Heaven and Hell, right? Their comeback after Dehumanizer with Ronnie James Dio and Vinny Appice, not as Black Sabbath, but as Heaven and Hell. You know, Heaven and Hell name only, it's Black Sabbath, right? So there's a few you could point to, but for me, the greatest one is this one, because I think, you know, losing their amazing, legendary, iconic singer, having to regroup and coming back and knocking it out of the park right off the bat. That's a pretty good comeback, if you ask me. So let's go take a look at some of my honorable mentions, shall we? So, how about The Sciences by Sleep? First album in many years from this stoner metal / doom band, and man, was it a good one. Well worth the wait. I remember when it came out, too. It just kind of came out with like no fanfare. We were all like, whoa, new album from The Sleep in a million years, and it's great, and it's one of their best. Excellent stuff. Alice Cooper, you could point to a lot of albums for Alice that were good comebacks. For me, I think his big comeback was really Trash. Now, you know, there's a couple albums that came out right before that. He came out of that dark period, right? A couple of years of inactivity, and then boom, got back into music, and those are pretty good. I'd say really good, but they really didn't capture the public's attention like Trash did. Trash, I think, was really where Alice became a megastar all over again. So I think you have to include that kind of album. Europe, Start from the Dark. First album in many, many years. And sees the band get back into heavier material, more hard rockin' material. That goes back to like their early days with a little bit of contemporary sound. I think Start from the Dark is a great, great return to form for them. Kansas, The Prelude Implicit. First studio album after the departure of Steve Walsh. Ronnie Platt on lead vocals. Sounds just like a Kansas album. It's through and through American prog rock as only Kansas can do. All the elements are there. Great, great return in a studio, brand new studio release from them. So good. You know what? Say what you want about it, but Metallica's Death Magnetic, at least it's the band trying to get back to doing what we wanted them to do, right? So I think for me, I don't mind Death Magnetic too much. Yeah, it's not as potent as the Metallica stuff from the 80s, and maybe it sounds a little forced. Do they really want to be playing that kind of metal again? I don't know, but it's as close as they're going to get to their thrash roots, I think, and I have to got to give them credit for that. I think it was a pretty good comeback after like all those years of kind of, you know, uncertainty, weird albums and stuff, so I think that was a good one. Frank Marino, Eye of the Storm, to date still the last studio album he ever did, and the first one in quite a while. And I think Eye of the Storm is a terrific album from this amazing guitar player. Styx, The Mission. Again, first album in many years after Cyclorama, which I think is really good. Of all new material, right? They did the covers album. But I think The Mission is just a amazing return to their prog roots, going all the way back to like, you know, the early albums, Man of Miracles and Equinox and Crystal Ball and Grand Illusion, right? The more bombastic, progressive stuff. I think The Mission is a terrific, terrific prog rock album from Styx. How about Miles Davis, The Man with the Horn? After all those years tucked away in an apartment in New York City, drug-induced exile, he comes back to start off the 80s with an amazing album with guitarist Mike Stern in tow. Really great funky fusion album that I think I've always loved, and I think it was so good to have Miles back recording music again, clean and sober, well, relatively speaking, and ready to get back doing what he does so well. Queen, Innuendo, great comeback to rock and epic form for the band Queen. And of course, this would be the last studio album recorded while Freddie Mercury was still alive. But I think it's a really good one. After a couple, kind of like somewhat mediocre albums, right? That came out. The 80s was a weird decade for the band. Scorpions, Rock Believer. Fairly recent album for them. I'll be honest. I think Scorpions had a bunch of kind of weak albums starting in the early mid 90s, going into the 2000s, and I think with Rock Believer they kind of came back and went back to basics. Right, let's go back to doing what we do so best: hard drive and heavy metal rock and roll. Rock Believer is a good one. Alcatraz, Born Innocent. First studio album from the band, fronted by Graham Bonnet in quite a while. It's a totally good one. Revamped lineup. Got the 3 founding members and then some new folks, but I think it still sounds like a kick-ass Alcatraz album after all those years. Creator, Violent Revolution. After some questionable albums doing some different sounds, they get back to their thrash, German thrash basics with Violent Revolution. Really strong album. Really strong album. Halloween, Master of the Rings. First album with their new singer. First album after a couple of what you could label as disaster albums with Michael Kiske, where the band just kind of got really far away from what they were known for. I think time has like softened up the blow a little bit for those 2 albums. Pink Bubbles Go Ape and Chameleon, right? They're not as terrible as we thought they were back then, but they were big time disappointments, commercially speaking and critically speaking, and I think that Master of the Rings got them right back on track as leaders of the European power metal scene. Night Ranger, Somewhere in California. Again, after a long time away, I think Somewhere in California sounds just like a classic Night Ranger album. Really strong. To me, it's after those classic 80s albums, I think it's one of their best. Right? It's stood up the test of time after all those years. Really, really good. Heart, Jupiter's Darling. Another really, really strong album from Heart. Again, after years of not releasing much material and, using lots of outside writers for songs and things, they get back to writing and doing their own material. And it's got all the little flavors that we love so much from Heart. The Cult, Between Good and Evil. Good, heavy album. Return to just hard rock and cult. Really, really good record there. Again, been away for a few years, and maybe some albums that didn't really grab the public eye much, but I think that one's a really, really good one. Fate's Warning, Darkness in a Different Light. Again, took a number of years off without recording anything, releasing anything. Ray, of course, was off working with Redemption quite a bit. Decided, maybe it's time to step away from that and come back to Fate's Warning and spend much more time doing this. And I think this is one of their strongest albums in years. And I some of those like early 2000 albums I think were good but not great. I think this is getting back to doing exactly what Fate's Warning does. One of the grandfathers, godfathers of progressive metal. Really, really strong album. Megadeth, United Abominations. You can say what you want. I know some people really like a lot of those late 90s, early 2000 albums from Megadeth. But to me, I think they really kind of got back to being a force on the metal scene with United Abominations. I think it's a really strong album. And they've knocked it out of the park ever since then. So again, none of those old thrash bands who have a like kind of late lease in life and just started releasing kick-ass albums in the last like 10, 15 years all over again. Lynyrd Skynyrd, 1991. Long time between albums. After the tragedy in the late 70s, right? We got Rossington Collins Band, we got the Alan Collins Band, we got a few other things here and there. But Artemis Pyle Band and whatnot. But Lynyrd Skynyrd reuniting in the late 80s with younger brother Johnny Van Zant on vocals. 1991's a pretty strong album, actually. It's different band, different time, different era, different decade. But I think 1991 is just a really, really strong Southern rock album from the band. A great return. Marillion, Season's End. Again, kind of like the Black Sabbath thing, right? You replace an iconic singer, Mr. Derek Dick, otherwise known as Fesh. You basically bring in a relative unknown and Steve Hogarth, otherwise known as H. And that first album doesn't miss a beat. it's a bit different, right? But I think just so good, and just kept the fan base going, and I think brought in lots of new fans, right? Because the sound changed ever so slightly, right? Continued to change going on. I think Season's End is an absolute triumph and a great comeback, considering, who knows what they were going to do without that big guy on the vocals, right? Pentagram, Last Rites, first studio album in many, many years, and the DC area band just crushed it on this. Last Rites is a terrific, terrific Doom album, and again, brought a lot of attention to the band for people maybe who hadn't listened to or hadn't heard Pentagram all that much, because a lot of their albums were pretty, fairly obscure, released on small labels, and all of a sudden you have them on a bigger label, and all of a sudden things are right in Doom world with the latest Pentagram. Bruce Springsteen, The Rising, first album with the E Street Band in many, many years, comes right on the heels of 9/11, and not only was a huge seller, but it spawned a huge tour with Bruce and the band, and I saw them a couple times on that tour. I thought it was outstanding, and I think The Rising is a terrific, terrific comeback album. He did some albums all on his own that were pretty decent, fairly big sellers, but The Rising kind of got everybody together once again, and all things were good. What else we got here? How about the Rolling Stones, Hackney Diamonds? I mean, first album of all new music in quite a long time, since Bridges to Babylon. I think Hackney Diamonds is a lot of fun. Got a lot of attention, and just a great comeback, showing that these old guys can still write and put together great new music. And it's a really big album. Really good album. Mr. Big, What If? Another good return after many years away. Pick up right where they left off. Stryper, No More Hell to Pay. Same thing. In fact, I would argue that I think some of their more recent output even eclipses their classic 80s stuff. Because I think these, No More Hell to Pay and a lot of the stuff that came after it are just terrific melodic metal albums with some blistering guitars and great vocals. Really, really good. Van de Graaff Generator, Present. Mostly instrumental stuff, right? And mix of weird things, but it's after a long time away. It was so great to have Van de Graaff Generator back. Possessed, Revelations of Oblivion. Another terrific return to form after a lot of years not recording anything from the great early death metal / thrash band. Revelations of Oblivion is excellent. Destruction, All Hell Breaks Loose. They put out a couple of those kind of groove metal, trying to be Pantera albums, which, why they went that route, don't know. But All Hell Breaks Loose kicks total ass, and it's if the classic lineup of Destruction never left. And all of a sudden, you got Schmier back on vocals, and man, what a ripping kick-ass album. Armored Saint, Symbol of Salvation. They lose Dave to leukemia, their lead guitar player, and they come back, regrouped with one of their best albums, Symbol of Salvation. Absolutely terrific American metal. Carcass, Surgical Steel, again, many years away. What a great return. Just kick-ass melodic death metal, ripping guitars all over the place. Great return from Carcass. John Lennon, Double Fantasy, right? Got to include that here as well. Him and Yoko put together this great album. Big seller, of course. Last studio album we will get from him before he's tragically assassinated. But what a big album this was. And I think after a couple, mediocre albums in the 70s, I think that was a great way to move into the 80s. Would have been a great way to move into the 80s and going forward for John. But unfortunately, he was taken from us too soon. And there's so many others, man. I was thinking Voivod, they returned back after the loss of Piggy. Came back better than ever. Just so many more we could talk about. But I think comebacks are always cool to see in music, and that's it. That ties this month, ties it up in a bow. We'll see you tomorrow for beginning of another month. Speaking of comebacks or forgotten favorites, I've got a whole list of stuff that I'm going to start picking from, so we'll start doing that immediately tomorrow morning. So till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. Thank you in advance for all your support there. We'll see you soon here with more stuff. I am Pete Pardo. Forgotten Favorites tomorrow. Till then, Have a good one. Hopefully I'll see some of you at Queensryche Armored Saint at Starland Ballroom in New Jersey tonight. Otherwise, I'll see you here tomorrow morning. Take care. Bye-bye.